In order to best understand the problems of today, we have to look to the past in order to understand what led to today, in hopes of correcting for tomorrow. So, with that being said, it's time for Mega Rant, motherfuckers! Alright? Today's Mega Rant is going to take a deep dive into the steady but completely predictable decline of the WWE slash the WWF for those of us who've been around for a minute. Now, it should be noted that we're going to start our analysis where it matters, the Attitude Era, right? Everything before that, quite frankly, is not as interesting. And more importantly, the Attitude Era is the peak of wrestling. So in order to understand the decline, we must start at the peak. So for those of you that have been living a rock forever, the Attitude Era is largely accepted as the highlight of wrestling, as the high point, as the zenith of wrestling as a medium. If you have watched my retro reviews, you understand why already. But let's make it quick. In the 90s and early 2000s, the late 90s and early 2000s, WWE understood, WWF and then WWE understood what made television good and what wrestling fundamentally was. Wrestling is not a sport. Wrestling is a performance. And because it's a performance, it must lean heavily into the performative elements. If you treat it like a sport and you treat it like an art form, then you find yourself with your thumb up your ass. In reality, wrestling should be treated as what it is, a television program, specifically a weekly television program. And in the late 90s and early 2000s, the people in charge, Vince Russo and Vince McMahon, understood this, and business was a booming. WWF, before they got sued and had to change to WWE, was the top of the top. If you weren't around back then, you can never appreciate it. And no discussion of the apex of wrestling is complete without acknowledging the importance of WCW, as well as, to a far lesser extent, ECW, which were all competing for a significant market share of viewers, numbering over 10 million. It was not uncommon for both Raw and Nitro to draw over 5 million people. That was the norm. So in total, you would get like 10 to 15 million people watching wrestling every week. For context, SmackDown last week got about 900,000. So there you have it. It's dropped off by more than 15 times, right? So with that being said, let's get to it and understand exactly what was happening. When Monday Night Raw, WCW, and also ECW were around, the culture was completely different, right? I know a lot of people say, oh, every generation thinks they're cooler than the last generation. Well, I got news for you, pal. I know that, but quite frankly, sometimes it's true. Now, I think we can look at this objectively. The hippies are not cooler than the people that went to World War II to fight and kill Nazis. There's no way that's possible, right? Likewise, today's children, Generation Z, Generation Alpha, and even the haters' own generation, the millennials, as I am a late millennial, we are not as cool as the generation before us. This is a fact, and one that people have to accept. You could see this by just looking around and seeing what's popular. You got some broad named Chapel Rowan. She looks like a fucking drag queen. You know what I mean? And this is like the apex of like women nowadays. You got Ice Spice. She looks like a dude in the face. And all of a sudden we're told that she's supposed to be good looking. Whereas back in the day, we had Mariah Carey, Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera. I think I've made my point, cucks. It speaks for itself. On the men's side, today you've got Ryan Gosling and Ryan, the other one, Ryan Reynolds, which, by the way, you do not need both of those guys. And back in the day, we had actors like Denzel in his prime, Nicolas Cage, Mel Gibson. I think I've made my point, but I could go on forever. Tom Cruise in his prime, Brad Pitt in his prime, everything in his prime. So the point is, we find ourselves in a scenario where, for better or for worse, things have gone the way they have gone. In my opinion, and I think everybody that's honest will admit that this has been for the worse. Wrestling is no different, right? In the 90s, there was a cultural revolution of sorts because the boring ass 80s that nobody could possibly care about were over finally. And all of this sanitized post-hippie, post-Cold War nonsense, people saying golly gee, was being replaced by people, including Triple H and Shawn Michaels, saying suck it, all right? Suck it was a popular catchphrase. We haven't had a popular catchphrase come out of wrestling literally since suck it. Maybe if you want to be generous, you can say something like, if you want some, come get some. Like, that's pretty much as close as we've gotten, you know what I mean? Everything else has been a complete disaster. Now, the reason why I bring up the suck it is because DX, if you had to describe what DX was as a gimmick, the answer was very simple. They were young people in the 90s. That's all it was. They were the 90s rebellious spirit, the cool guy product. Everything that had an S in it was replaced with a Z. The Hardy Boys became the Hardy Boys with a Z. The Dudley Boys were the Dudley Boys with a Z. The whole point was there is an edge now, and things are moving towards cool, extreme, high risk, and aggressive. The UFC, one of the most famous iconographies of the UFC is that jack dude, just like the fan, just squeezing every muscle he can and just looking intense. That is the perfect encapsulation of the 90s. And of course, this bled into the early 2000s, right? As a result of this, many different forms of media kind of went that way, right? All of a sudden, people were starting to express themselves in ways they couldn't. There was a basketball player, one of my personal favorites, Dennis Rodman, right? Who bleached his hair yellow and would wear dangly earrings, which was completely not appropriate back in the day. Now people do it unironically, right? They don't do it to set a trend. They do it because men dress like women all of a sudden. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. Dennis Rodman is another icon of the 90s. Now, the one thing that I think a lot of people get completely wrong is the fact that WWE did not kind of find its way into this, right? Vince McMahon was not this brilliant man with his finger on the pulse. And this is the problem that I've always had with people saying things like Vince is out of touch. Here's the truth, motherfuckers. Vince is a pioneer of this. Vince shaped the culture. It's not like the culture around him was shaped, and then Vince McMahon was like, I know it's gonna be big now, so I'm gonna do it. He made it big, right? Oh, what about Paul Heyman? He had the Sandman first. Paul Heyman couldn't draw a damn dime of his company. But even if that were the case, it doesn't really matter who did it first, right? Paul Heyman had success in his own way. And if you ever watched ECW back in the day, people would come out like fucking Don Callis would come out. Other Taz would come out. They would curse on TV. They would do crazy things. And more importantly, they would straight up just say, like, this network fucking sucks. If it weren't for us, this piece of shit would be out of business. Nowadays, you get corporate Cody who says, I'm happy to be on Netflix. You know what I mean? Like, that's the difference, right? But again, I digress. Remember, for all of you that were around, when the Nintendo 64 came out? Remember that commercial? Like, all I want for Christmas in a Nintendo 64. Hey, right? That was the presentation of video games. Nintendo 64 was a kiddie system designed for children, right? And that's how that was. It was a kid system. By contrast, the PlayStation marketed itself completely differently. PlayStation was for the cool kids. This was the first time in the history of video games where video games were marketed towards cool kids, aka normal kids, aka the big brother instead of the little brother, right? Nobody was too cool for that shit because PlayStation was marketed as the 90s product, right? Wrestling, I'm not saying that they stole it from Vince McMahon, and I'm not saying Dennis Rodman was inspired by Vince, but he was a big WWE fan. The fact of the matter, and WCW fan, the fact of the matter is, the coolest people on TV, believe you me, motherfucks, were the wrestlers. Nobody, if it wasn't Michael Jordan, right, or Dennis Rodman, nobody gave a fuck about anybody. Oh, Karl Malone. I was a big Karl Malone guy and a big John Stockton guy, but they weren't cool. The cool people were The Rock, Stone Cold, to a lesser degree Triple H, The Undertaker player, Shawn Michaels, etc. These people made the 90s better. They did not become better because it was the 90s. They were just so cool that they changed the culture. Obviously in America, but all around the world, people were saying, suck it. You know how many kids got suspended from school for doing the cross chop and saying, suck it? Right? Back then, everything was like, slam it on someone's head, break this. Anyone remember Limp Bizkit? Remember the song? What's it called? Break Stuff, I think. You know, it's all about the he said, she said bullshit. Da-da-da-da-da. You know what I'm saying? Like, all the songs were about breaking things, being violent, being wild, and being untamed. And that was what the 90s were. But the catalyst of this, maybe not the absolute catalyst, was Vince McMahon in many ways. Wrestling set the tone. Wrestling did not get the tone set upon it like nowadays, right? Nowadays, for example, you have, what's his name? The guy who sings Fiend, I forget his name, Travis Scott. You have Travis Scott come in, and he sets the tone. He comes, and naturally, he looks at Bruce Pritchard, a fucking dork, and Paul Levesque, who is no longer Triple H, another dork, and he says, well, I have an opinion on this. The Rock, who's been completely sanitized, emasculated, and castrated, does the same thing. Back in the day, it was the other way around. The Rock and Triple H had no say in this. Vince McMahon and Vince Russo, people that understood television, were like, this is what we're going to push. Jerry Springer was also a catalyst. They're like, look, people are weird. Let's embrace it. Let's cause chaos, right? And everyone was happier. Of course, this was not the entire culture, but it was mainstream. Because the 90s also had people like the Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, Britney Spears, right? Things that people my age were supposed to like, but that we inherently disliked because there was a cooler alternative. You turned on TV and you saw Backstreet Boys being like, this is the shape of my heart. What the fuck, right? And then you see Eminem, and he's like, new kids on the block, suck a lot of dick, boy-girl groups make me sick. And you're like, yeah, I think I like that guy more than I like NSYNC. You know what I mean? And then for the weird kids, you had Marilyn Manson, you had other things to look forward to. And all the things that were mainstream were badass. Not all of them, but there was a lot of badassery, right? Yes, some of the kids, usually the special ed kids, they liked NSYNC, but the majority of us were like, fuck that shit. 50 Cent came out, everyone liked 50 Cent, primarily because of his name. But nowadays, you know, I don't listen to the modern rap as much, but I've seen what they look like. I've seen Jack Harlow. Shut the fuck up, polish my shoe. Sell me a game at GameStop. He looks like a fucking GameStop salesman. You know? Then you got this guy called Trippie Redd. This guy is like the ugliest person maybe of all time. He looks like a retard. He's got like a cross tattoo. He's like 5'1", fat, right? With dumbass red hair. He's the kind of person that if you see him, like in the 90s, if you saw him on the street, you'd be like, get the fuck out of the way. And he would do exactly that. Because people talk that way. People were aggressive. People were men and people were women. Nowadays, wrestling serves as the placeholder. Wrestling gets the cues from other forms of media. And this is not necessarily a bad thing if done correctly. Have you noticed the amount of bullshit that they put on us to consume on TV? I'll give you an example. The concept of black comedy. For those that don't know, black comedy, right? It's different than dark comedy. Black comedy is like this kind of comedy that isn't comedy. Like if you ever watched the show The Bear on FX, I watched this. People are like, this is amazing. And I'm like, this is a bunch of fucking ugly weirdos having problems in a kitchen setting. Who the fuck would watch this shit? You know what I mean? Everyone in that show is fucking hideous looking. They all look like shit, right? And then it's supposed to be a comedy, but there's not even one joke. Not one person laughs watching this shit, right? This is not the only example. There are many examples of bad comedy that they just call black comedy, right? Because it's supposed to be this esoteric like nonsense that nobody actually enjoys. Think of like the Coen brothers movies, right? It's like, it's not funny at all, but it's considered a comedy because it fucking is nothing. It's not a drama. It's not interesting. It's just pretentious and annoying. And back in the day, we always had this. Pretentious and annoying has been around human culture since the Enlightenment, at least, arguably since ancient Greece. But historically, there has been someone who has said, I don't give a fuck about this. You can be pretentious all you want, but I'm gonna kick your ass. This is fundamentally what the Attitude Era was about. Many of the heels in the Attitude Era were the people that we inherently hated. Corporatists like Vince McMahon, like the corporation, the right to censor, people that want to tell you what you can and cannot say. Nobody liked them except for people that actually watch wrestling and they're like, oh, I get what they are as a character, so I like them for their contributions. But even people that were fans of the right to censor, like me, I was happy when Devon grabbed Ivory and gave her to Bubba Ray so he could powerbomb that bitch through a table, right? That's fundamentally what it was. It was, they want us to do this, but we're not gonna do this, right? The whole point of WrestleMania 14, when Mike Tyson comes, is that Mike Tyson is someone that doesn't take cues and doesn't take orders from anybody. He was a wild dude. Mike Tyson, I should do a video on Mike Tyson and the complete emasculation that he has had to endure. You know, one of the alpha males of all time. Now he's just like out there, like, you know, being a little cocky. He's like, oh, you know, like I'm not like I was anymore. Like they've completely, in order to rehabilitate him and put him on TV again, they've asked him to just be a shell of himself. And I like Mike Tyson, don't get me wrong, I always have, right? But now he's out there getting his ass beat by Jake Paul. Oh, he took the money, whatever, man. You know, believe what you want. But the facts are the facts. The reality is, Mike Tyson comes in, WrestleMania 14, which will be the first chapter of this rant. He comes in, and the entire point is Mike Tyson is the baddest man on the planet because he is the baddest boxer of all time, realistically, until that point. I think there's people that have surpassed him now. Lennox Lewis surpassed him, Tyson Fury, Usyk, other people, Anthony Joshua, Deontay Wilder, all of them would beat his ass. But like back then, I think he was the number one. Like I think in his prime, he would have destroyed Muhammad Ali. It's not even close. But anyways, he was just a badass. But he comes into WWE and he plays this corporatist role kind of, right? He's the guest of honor. He's there with Vince. He's there with Triple H and Shawn Michaels, who is basically a corporatist at this point. And Stone Cold comes out and says, look, I don't give a fuck who you are, corporatist. I'm going to beat your ass. And then the savage comes out of Mike Tyson and he's like, wait, corporatist, basically, right? Pushes him. This leads to a feud. And the culmination of the feud is Mike Tyson helps count for Stone Cold. And then Shawn Michaels is like, what the hell? Why would you do that for? And Tyson knocks him out, right? And Tyson aligns himself with Stone Cold, which makes perfect sense because they're fundamentally the same thing. Mike Tyson was always about that. He was about to look like, you don't want advice from me, motherfucks. I'm not the guy that you ask things of. I'm the guy that beats other men. That's what I do. And that's what Stone Cold fundamentally was. And that's why wrestling was a massive success. Now, on the other side, we had soft ass shit, right? Of course, everybody needs soft things, right? The balance is important. I would even argue that if every form of entertainment was like WWE, then everyone would be upset. Right? That's why you had shows like Friends popping up, which were massively successful, right? Not really that funny, not my kind of comedy, that's for sure. But I get it. It's charming, right? It makes you feel like you belong. And there was room for that too. There was room for sissy music as well. But now, all the music is sissy music. Oh, have you heard of the new or the old song by FGK Duck? No, I haven't. I'm talking about mainstream here. I'm not talking about random ass rappers that had like one song nobody listened to and then they got shot and now people pretend they were goats. These are just the facts, motherfuckers. These are just the facts. Everything in the 90s was about badassery. It was about being extreme, doing extreme shit, but extreme shit that is badass, right? Extreme shit like fucking jumping off your roof into the pool. Not extreme shit like dying on fentanyl, which is like weird as shit. You know what I'm saying? The way that wrestling took advantage of this and the way that wrestling shaped this cannot ever be understated. WCW fundamentally failed because of their 80s reliance, right? The world had moved on to the 90s, and this move was done by WWF, by Vince McMahon largely, and other things like Jerry Springer. So Vince never had his finger on the pulse. Vince was the pulse. Meanwhile, Eric Bischoff and Billionaire Ted weren't, right? The smart wrestlers in WCW, I'm talking about your Kevin Nashes, your Scott Halls, later on your Stings, Jeff Jarrett's, Goldberg's, and Hulk Hogan's, they understood this is all about the money, right? But they weren't cool anymore, right? Hogan wasn't cool anymore. The world and society had rejected the Superman stereotype. People started thinking the Joker was better than Batman. So that's what Vince did. He started creating characters that are more Joker-esque, right? You can still have a lot of variability. Triple H can be a face or a heel. Same thing with The Rock, right? But WCW, for a long time, relied heavily on presenting the superhero, right? Eventually, shit hit the fan, and they realized, oh, let's do, the NWO, which was a massive success because that equally captured the same aesthetic, the same 90s aesthetic, the same going against the establishment aesthetic, right? That's how it was. In going against the aesthetic, people were able to make a lot of money and prolong their careers. But fundamentally, the 80s mentality and the over-reliance on people like the Ultimate Warrior and Hulk Hogan, who obviously were cool, but were not indicative of what was going on around them, right? That's just what it was. Eventually, the superior personalities of WWF, which largely is Stone Cold and The Rock, they are the reason why WWF defeated WCW. Because Stone Cold is a 10 out of 10 superstar, and The Rock is a 10 out of 10, probably the best in terms of all time. Like, The Rock might be the best ever just because of the impact that he had in such a short period of time. The Rock and Stone Cold are out there carrying wrestling on their backs, but not by themselves. Because other people realized what makes wrestling good. And instead of hiring like models and athletes, they hired people with big physiques, right? Very attractive women, and people with charisma. The primary requirement was to be charismatic. Simple as that. Nowadays, the primary requirement for some reason is to be an athlete, right? Which is why you have these fat ass losers like Dark State. And people are like, oh, these guys are great. Oh, this guy played safety in college. He was there for 5 years, played 3 games. What the fuck are you talking about? These guys aren't good enough to be in the NFL. Nobody gives a shit. Like, they can walk through their campus tomorrow and nobody's gonna recognize them. They're not big stars. Oh, they can throw a ball long. Great. When it's time to throw a ball in WWE, I'll be sure to call like fucking Osiris or Jay Cutler or Brandon J, whatever the fuck his name is. You know what I mean? I'll be sure to call him. But when it's time to be charismatic and to draw numbers, I'd rather rely on Val Venus. I'd rather rely on Eddie Guerrero. I'd rather rely on the people like China, Jericho, The Rock, obviously, right? The Rock was a failed athlete. You wouldn't know that The Rock played football if you watch him in WWE because nobody gave a fuck. He wasn't there because he happened to have played football. He was there because he was awesome. And the 90s made sure that this shit kept going for the last few years and well into the 2000s, right? In 2000, the world was switching. Y2K was happening. The internet was becoming a mainstream type of thing. And things changed fundamentally. But not as fundamentally as anyone would think, right? A lot of people get caught up in the advent of social media and streaming, right? While those are massive cultural things and massive inventions, the reality is they're not as big of an invention as the internet was. And the internet didn't really change the culture much, right? In fact, the culture continued exactly as it was. All of a sudden, people were like, fuck the establishment. I'm going to download music on Napster, on LimeWire, on Kazaa, motherfucks, right? People were out there doing all these things because it was the anti-establishment framework. Now, in order to be anti-establishment, you have to occasionally say, fuck the establishment. And the lines were delineated, right? Up until John Cena won the title from JBL, it was all that. Think about it. What is evolution? They are the establishment, right? They are these guys who think that they should be on top because of who they are. That's the entire gimmick. The gimmick is Ric Flair is a legend, Triple H is clearly the best, and these two guys are undeniable, right? So if someone like Shelton Benjamin or the Hurricane has aspirations to take the spot of Randy Orton, he's going to be quickly reminded that Randy Orton is that dude and that the other people that I mentioned are jobbers, right? That's the whole point of evolution. The entire point of the often mentioned Triple H Booker T feud is exactly that. Triple H and Ric Flair are the establishment. This was the same point as the Triple H and Shawn Michaels and Benoit feud. Triple H is like, I'm the establishment. I'm him. You're not him, Benoit. And everybody else that got pushed was the opposite. Kurt Angle is the establishment. Kurt Angle is the Olympic gold medalist. He is the guy that's supposed to be good. So when someone like Stone Cold fights him, even if Kurt Angle is the face, people are going to cheer for Stone Cold. Because Stone Cold's the guy that's not supposed to be there. He's the guy that should have gotten fired way before. Brock Lesnar is obviously an anomaly, and he would be booked the exact same way, whether he debuted in 1960 or if he debuted tomorrow, right? That's an anomaly. That's a freak of nature. That goes without saying, right? But every other face and heel dynamic was effectively the establishment, right? And the rebel. Let's look at Triple H versus Shawn Michaels. Triple H has established himself as the dominant guy. Shawn Michaels comes in as the rebel. He comes in as the DX guy, the guy that just won't die. So Triple H turns on him. Let's look at JBL. His entire run was he takes the establishment. He betrays his best friend Farouk, aka Ron Simmons, and joins effectively Paul Heyman. He rebrands in one of the greatest rebrandings of all time, and he becomes the establishment, motherfucks. And who's gonna beat him? Well, a series of anti-establishment guys like Booker T, The Undertaker, and others are gonna try. But ultimately, it's gonna be the fuck-up white rapper guy, right? The ultimate anti-establishment figure. John Cena, since Stone Cold. Then after that, here's where shit turns, motherfucks. John Cena wins the title, and he becomes the establishment. Now, it is what it is. Cena is a corporatist. Cena is a careerist. In real life, that is. Cena was no longer playing the rapper character. He was just a guy with a spinny belt that pretty much said, oh, I'm a good guy. I do it for the children. Children? Yeah, that's pretty much what he became. But then here's the problem. That's fine, right? And you want that to be the face of the company. But where are all the heels or the other people that are anti-establishment as well? Cena was left to feud with people like Randy Orton, who, as we've already established, was the establishment. Meanwhile, the culture shifted. In the mid to late 2000s, like by 2010, it was a wrap. People started liking things that men should never have liked. All of a sudden, you got grown men talking about Harry Potter. You got grown men talking about Twilight up in this bitch. You know what I mean? Then, all those, remember those shitty comedies that everyone pretends were good? Like the ones like the Judd Apatow comedies, right? The ones with Jonah Hill and Seth Rogen, who's not funny at all, right? Seth Rogen and Jonah Hill took the spot of people like Owen Wilson and Vince Vaughn and Ben Stiller. And you expect the same level of humor, the same level of culture? Things were changed. And things were changed for the worse, right? No longer the late 90s and early 2000s rap, which in my honest opinion is peak, where you had Eminem and people like Nelly, Fabulous, Snoop Dogg, in my opinion, in his prime, because I don't think his prime was in the 90s, right? You had people that were actually cool, right? Nelly would go out there and he would say, drop down and get your eagle on, girl. Yeah. He would also say, hey, must be the money. You know what I'm saying? He would say all these things that became things that people will just yell out in the streets. Now, you have Travis Scott, who Nelly would beat his ass in 2 seconds, and this guy's like, fiend, 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 fiend. I get the goosebumps every time. Yeah. Do you? Do you get the goosebumps? How about be a man and tell me something cool? Oh, I feel my sadness is coming. I'm always depressed. Oh, it's important. Ah, shut the fuck up. Ah, shut up, you thong-wearing fatty. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to hear it. People wanted that. And for a long time, people would say, we want the Attitude Era back. But then here's the problem. Because wrestling was no longer cool, cool people were no longer attracted to it. I'm talking about the fans, of course, but I'm also talking about the wrestlers, right? All of a sudden, the Nepo babies started overflowing, right? And these were not Nepo babies of people that matter, right? Like, for example, I'm okay with Ava Raine being the general manager in NXT. I'm okay with her having a job for life because her dad fucking made this company, right? And at the end of the day, I don't give a flying fuck. She's The Rock's daughter. Some of that shit had to have rubbed off on her, right? But when you tell me, oh, Cody Rhodes, they're like, he's Dusty Rhodes' son. When they said that shit, when Cody Rhodes debuted at 19, nobody knew who Dusty Rhodes was. Surprise, surprise, motherfuckers. It's Weezy F, baby, no pacifier. You know what I'm saying? Nobody knew who Dusty Rhodes was. You had to look that shit up. People are like, who? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't watch in the fucking like 70s and 80s. Everyone then pretended that Dusty Rhodes was this brilliant wrestler. I've seen clips. It's just him dancing badly. You know? They're like, he's so charismatic. That's another thing, by the way, motherfuckers. This came and went, right? Back in the day when Dusty Rhodes was dancing like a retard. He dances so poorly. His promo delivery skills are like, they're upper mid. They're not bad, obviously, right? But they're like, this guy's so charismatic. And you hear the same shit being said about people like Trick Williams. You know, they're like, oh, he's charismatic. Oh, do you see the Ricky Saints promo? He's so charismatic. It's just him yelling, right? It's just him delivering something without fucking up, right? CM Punk really took advantage of this, right? That's not charisma. Charisma, like just look at any Trick Williams promo and any Dusty Rhodes promo, then literally go on YouTube and type in The Rock promo, right? And find something before 2001, and you're gonna see what charisma is. Where The Rock just looks up, he doesn't even have to say anything, motherfucks. Michael Cole has the mic in front of him, and he just looks up, and people start chanting, Rocky, Rocky. And sometimes Michael Cole steps out of line, and The Rock says, Michael Cole, know your role, and shut your mouth. They are chanting my name. And then everyone in the arena starts doing this. I went to an Attitude Era Raw when I was a wee lad, and one of my good friends, he was much older than me, by a few years, you know, but back then, when you're like 8 and the guy's like 12, he was like a family friend, right? Like, that's a big difference, right? And he was like he was like, oh, The Rock's stupid, Stone Cold sucks. He was a Triple H guy, right? And then like, it didn't matter. When we were in the audience and The Rock starts saying his things, he starts saying, Rocky, Rocky. He couldn't help it, motherfucks. He couldn't help it because The Rock was that cool, you know? Now, with that being said, all of a sudden, going back to the debut of Cookie Rhodes, which I think also is a relevant point, because it is the beginning of the Ruthless Aggression era, which, while not as bad as today, it was a significant step down from the Attitude Era. And there's two things that happened. Number one, the debut of boring-ass people, right? All of a sudden, you had Cody Rhodes, Ted DiBiase, Charlie Haas, Shelton Benjamin, right? And like Chris Masters. These are guys that they had something going for them, right? But the amount of excitement relative to the amount of boredom was significant. If you look at like the people that debuted, the noteworthy people that we can legitimately remember that debuted from the 90s in WWE, right? Let's start in 98, right? Well, first we had Kane before that, but let's just ignore Kane for now. Kurt Angle, right? Debuted. One of the GOATs. Jericho debuted. One of the GOATs. Guerrero debuted. One of the GOATs. Benoit, Perry Saturn, Dean Malenko, they were just there. Who gives a fuck, right? Not everyone was a hit, motherfucks, right? But these are some of the people that debuted in the 90s. And then in the 2000s as well, we had people like Brock Lesnar, 2001, I think he debuted, right? Kurt Angle was getting a push. Rikishi came back and people loved him. I didn't, but they did. Too Cool, right? The Hardy Boys, Edge and Christian. These people all debuted during that time. And what did they have in common? They're all cool, and they all have charisma, except for Rikishi, who is just like a fat guy dancing. But hey, you need that too sometimes. You know, you need a guy with a big ass to shake his ass so that people can laugh, right? You need that too. But then after that, we started getting debuts. Like Kurt Angle one day is like, oh, I like these guys. They're great. Shelton Benjamin and Charlie Haas. One wrestled for the Minnesota Gophers. The other one for Seton Hall. Like, I don't give a fuck. I don't care about their college accolades. Are you going to entertain me, yes or no? The answer was obviously not, right? We had those guys debut, and they got pushed to the moon. You know what I'm saying? We had, obviously, Brock Lesnar is different. He eats at a different table, as we've established many times on this channel. But then you've had other people debut later on, right? I'm talking about your Cody Rhodeses, right? I'm talking about your DiBiases. I'm talking about, and then obviously, in the Ruthless Aggression era, there was plenty of wrestlers that debuted that were good. The Miz is a great example, right? But the ratio of good to bad was tipping on the other side, right? The Miz is an all-timer, in my opinion. Sheamus is an all-timer, in my opinion, right? But Cody Rhodes is not. Dolph Ziggler is not. MVP is not, right? These were boring-ass people that they tried to present to us as cool, you know? And I'm like, I don't buy it. Nobody does. Finlay is a great example. Finlay had to come back. He was like in his 50s. But they're like, man, nobody here can fucking draw a dime. Maybe Finlay will do, right? Jesse and Festus. Festus was had like infinite chances. But even though this was happening, some of these people were entertaining. Batista was entertaining. Randy Orton was good at what he did. Cena was Cena, right? There was still some good. But then what happened was this. During that time, during that transitional period, like a year or so before Cena became WWE champion, right? The WrestleMania before that, Stone Cold gave a stunner to Brock Lesnar, and he gave a stunner to Goldberg, both of whom left the company. The Rock left the company. Stone Cold eventually left the company, right? So WWE just lost literally four of the biggest stars of all time, right? These are not just like, it's not like losing Drew McIntyre today, right? Like 1,000 Drew McIntyres do not equal one prime Goldberg, right? They lost everybody. So what did they do? Well, now the good news was that all these spots had opened up for other people to start trying to move to the next level, right? Because let's be real. If these people stayed, I don't think JBL and Eddie Guerrero would have been world champions. I don't think Benoit was going to be one either. You know? It would have been like a series of Goldberg and Brock Lesnar title runs. And Stone Cold in there somewhere as well. And The Rock would have been like a million-time WWE champion if he stayed. But he didn't. So now all these jobbers, right, relatively speaking, but jobbers that were cool, got their opportunity. Even someone like JBL, I think, is a great example because he's someone that is crazy and massively underrated, right? And nobody thought he was going to be good, right? People were like, oh, a lot of people liked, Bradshaw and Farouk. And I'll be fair, a lot of people liked Bradshaw more. I was more of a Farouk guy until JBL happened, right? I always thought Bradshaw was kind of silly because he's always like making jokes about drinking beer, and I'm like, nobody is really this much of a Texan, you know what I mean? But anyways, neither here nor there. The point is, all these people that had never gotten an opportunity started getting some opportunities. And some of them knocked it out of the park. Like Mark Henry, for example, failed. He had the opportunity, he failed. It didn't work out, right? He would later have a much better run, but, at that point he failed. JBL succeeded. Eddie Guerrero succeeded, right? Jeff Hardy, failed, really. Like, he had to leave to go to TNA. He didn't do it. Booker T succeeded. So the cream rose to the top. And with that, I want to talk a bit about the invasion angle because that had an incredible impact on the roster, right? All of a sudden, you had all these new guys, all of which had potential. Most of them failed for obvious reasons, but a few good ones remained. Namely, Booker T and, in my opinion, Gregory Helms. They're the two that stuck around during, after the invasion angle. Everybody else kind of drifted away, like DDP drifted away, and then other WCW guys whose contract had expired then started debuting and getting massively over. I'm talking about your Scott Steiners, the return of the NWO, and of course, Rey Mysterio, okay, who remains there until today. That's how great this guy is. But what I'm getting at here is this. After this insane influx of talent, right, and other people who had respectable careers, like Chuck Palumbo, he had a respectable run. Nobody would have expected that shit, but he did. He had a good run after the invasion angle, right? A few others, here and there. But generally speaking, all this shit died down, right? And all of a sudden we had this new crop of talent in the form of Cucky Rhodes and friends. And the problem was twofold. Number one, nobody gave a shit about them, right? And number two, the WWE didn't give a shit about them, right? Cucky Rhodes was presented the entire time as a nipple baby who would have never made it in the Attitude Era. Everyone knew this, including Cucky himself, right? He had no confidence. He was boring. He had a DDT finisher. Nobody gave a flying fuck about him. Now, what happened subsequently to this shit is people started changing along with the culture. All of a sudden, boring things became more acceptable. Jonah Hill movies became acceptable. People would start talking about them like they're hilarious. Like, did you see Superbad? I'm like, yeah, I didn't laugh once. Oh, they drew cocks wearing different outfits. Did they? Good for them. Fuck yourself. Right? Not funny at all. I didn't grow up with this boring ass shit. Action movies became lamer and lamer over time. A lot of people say it was when women started becoming action heroes, but it's not just that. It's when beta males as well started becoming action heroes, right? Look back at my Predator rant. We've had fucking Arnold Schwarzenegger, the alpha male of our species after Arnold, and 5 other super alphas, including Jesse Ventura, and of course, Carl Weathers. These guys, these 5 alphas couldn't beat one Predator. Barely Arnold had to do it with traps. Then we see Adrian Brody, the pianist, right, coming out there shooting like 15 Predators with a gun, and they just die like assholes. And you're like, oh, great. I guess Predators ain't shit. You know what I mean? And that's how it went down, motherfucks. There was no good action movies, and there hasn't been one in a long time. And there have been no good comedies in the last 10, 15 years. Like since Tropic Thunder and maybe Role Models, I don't know which one came first. Those are both, all-timers in my opinion. Everything else is just shit. There's no funny movies anymore. There was that one with Russell Crowe and Ryan Gosling. That one was okay, but I don't even remember what it's called. Nothing memorable. Whereas in the '90s we had like Rush Hour, Rush Hour 2, motherfucks. Rush Hour 3, cocksucks. Many other Chris Tucker movies, and of course Jackie Chan movies, right? We had excellent things to watch. We had the two best movies ever, maybe. Con Air, my favorite of all time. And we had, same guy, motherfucks. Nick Cage, bitches. The Rock, that's a great movie. 8mm, great movie. You know, just people carrying the fucking box office. People would look forward to. Like, people would talk about, oh, I wonder what movie Will Smith is gonna make this summer, because I know I'm gonna watch that shit. Is there any actor that people talk about that, like that way about now? Like, does anyone say, oh, I can't wait for the new, like, whatever the black guy is, Clarence, the guy who plays Captain America now? Nobody even knows his name. It's like Anthony something. Does anyone say I can't wait for that guy's next movie? Does anyone say I can't wait for the Seth Rogen movie? Nobody gives a fuck because these guys are dorks. And I will give credit where credit's due. That Anthony guy, he's pretty cool. You know, even though Eminem buried him as Clarence, he has like that Will Smith vibe going, but he's obviously not as good as Will Smith. But back then, people would be like, yo, it's like a guarantee that Nicolas Cage is going to make an excellent movie. It's a guarantee that Will Smith is going to make a summer blockbuster and everyone's going to go fucking watch that shit, right? People would go to watch because it's Will Smith. If there was a movie called Someone Takes a Shit on a Rock starring Will Smith, it would sell 100 million, right? Nowadays, you need Captain America because nobody gives a fuck about the actor, right? Nobody gives a shit. They're like, oh, the new Spider-Man is this guy. Oh, great. You've made him even more effeminate than usual. Spider-Man's already a dork, but you found like the dork amongst dorks. You know what I mean? This guy's like, he looks like a child. Tom Holland. Tom Holland, my ass. Go back to the originals. Cuts. Oh, Batman. Oh, it's the guy from Twilight. Oh, what a good movie it is. Nobody does anything, but it's a good movie. I don't know, motherfucks. The way the hater sees this, it has been a complete and utter disaster, right? It's been a disaster. All of it has been complete shit. Nobody ever cared about any of this. And then, to make matters worse, some of the good ones that came around during this era, and to some degree, some of the good ones that were from the previous era, right? Like your JBLs of the world, your Jerichos of the world, your Christians of the world, your Kurt Angles of the world, your Booker T's of the world. These guys weren't done yet. There was no room for Cookie Rhodes because John Cena was still on top. There was no room for fucking CM Punk because Batista was still there, right? There was no room for any of these fucks because Randy Orton was still there. So all the people that got signed during that time, effectively, if they weren't the people that I just mentioned, they all became massive jobbers. I'm talking about your Drew McIntyres. I'm talking about your Cookie Rhodeses, right? In other words, the remnants of the 90s and the 2000s were still in full effect, right? They were still there. People still wanted badasses. People still wanted Batista. Goldberg came back, everyone lost their minds. You know what I'm saying? A lot of things would turn out differently, and the way that they turned out would be the way that they are now. All the jobbers during this time eventually would get a second chance. And they would become stars by default. Meaning that nobody believed in them as stars when it was time for them to be stars, right? Nobody believed in anything. And the fact of the matter was, nobody gave a flying fuck about them until they were presented as the only viable option, right? It's as simple as that. Imagine this. Imagine if the NBA, which has already gotten much worse since the 90s as well, but imagine if the NBA, just imagine this like a 10-year period where nobody can play basketball, right? Where all the basketball players suck balls, right? This is happening in America. In America, we have scenarios now where, like, when was the last time the MVP of the NBA was an American? Yeah? So much for that shit. And I don't think it's going to be one for the foreseeable future. It's a bunch of weirdos from Europe and shit, you know? You got, like, Jokic, you know? Eventually, you know, Doncic is going to be the MVP. You know, then you got Canadians. You got other Europeans. You know Wemby's going to win one eventually, right? America sucks at basketball all of a sudden. But imagine if the whole world sucked ass at basketball, right? And the NBA was just shit. Let's say it had the same entertainment value as watching a WNBA game or perhaps a children's high school game, right? Well, some people would stick around, right? And all of a sudden, some mediocre player, right, like Andre Miller. Remember Andre Miller? Like someone like Andre Miller, let's say in 10 years he'd be a star, right? Let's say there's no more Steph Curry. There's no more LeBron, right? Just a bunch of Andre Millers and less, right? Well, the stars would be Andre Miller, but basketball would suck ass. That's what's happening here, right? Eventually, like a 25-year-old Andre Miller is going to be better than a 45-year-old LeBron, one would think. Probably not, honestly, but you understand what I'm getting at, right? Imagine if that happened. This cannot happen because basketball is a real sport and people actually want to become good at basketball. But wrestling is not a real sport. It's all dependent on how you run the TV show. And the decline, which brings us to the discussion of the present, playa. A discussion of the present and the abysmal ratings that we've had to tolerate is directly tied to a couple of factors. Number one, business mismanagement. Triple H sucks at this. He's making deals that aren't going to elevate the company in the slightest. He's making deals from the inferior position, right? There would have been a time, and there was a time, when Netflix was just starting, and Netflix would kill to do a deal with WWE. So what is it? What is it? Read whatever, the guy who founded Netflix, is a better businessman? Probably. But is he a better businessman than Vincent Kennedy McMahon? I doubt it, right? Oh, Vince could have bought the UFC. Nobody gives a shit about the UFC. That shit's going down the drain real quick, motherfucks. Betting scandals and a bunch of boring motherfucks. BKFC all day, cucks. But anyways, the point is this, right? As the 90s culture changed, it didn't change just because of random factors, right? It changed because of a lack of investment in that culture. Nobody got tired of Jerry Springer. Nobody got tired of the Attitude Era. It's just that the bad guys won. They told Vince McMahon, you can't have this on TV anymore. A bunch of Puritans all of a sudden got in power, right? The people that are friends of fucking, what's it called? The people that are friends of the right to censor and shit like that, these motherfucks got ahead and they became the people in power. And they started sanitizing everything. You can't do anything. You can't say anything. All too many steroids. You can't do chair shots of the head. They pretty much castrated wrestling for what it was. And naturally, the ratings dropped. The viewership dropped. The interest dropped. Nobody gave a flying fuck anymore. And then a bunch of Andre Millers came up, named Cucky Rhodes and Drew McIntyre, and people started to pretend that this was better. This is the part that really bothers me. It's one thing to say, hey man, it's not as good, but I still like it. Sure, be my guest. But when you see Nakamura, and then you start to gaslight yourself and the rest of the world into thinking that Nakamura is a better performer than Brock Lesnar, you are retarded. If you think Okada is better in the ring than Shawn Michaels and Kurt Angle, you are retarded. If your top 5 doesn't include Shawn Michaels or Kurt Angle, but instead includes Kenta, you are retarded, right? You just don't understand. It would be the equivalent of saying my top 5 in basketball, LeBron, who's that? Michael Jordan, I'm not putting him in there. Kobe, fuck him. My top 5 is Andre Miller, like Dennis Schroeder, and like name 3 other jabrones. That like German guy, that Wagner's in Franz Wagner, whatever his name is. Now that guy, he's better than LeBron. Fuck yourselves. Fuck your own asses with that, right? We all know what's good and we all know what's bad. And nothing wrong with things going down a slump. The culture has now pushed wrestling into a hole. When instead, wrestling used to push the culture into where the culture went. That's the fundamental difference. And that's the topic of this rant. Things were up when The Rock was around. Things are down when Cody Rhodes is around. And people are too dumb or maybe too cowardly to just call it like it is. Like, it's called Occam's razor, right? Occam's razor, which by the way is the entire point of the tag team, AOP. One was Occam, the other one was razor. That was the pun, cucks. But anyways, Occam's razor says that the simplest explanation is usually the best one. It's usually the correct one. So you see Cucky Rhodes, and you see the viewership go down, and you're like, well, I don't understand. Why doesn't he draw as much as Mankind and The Rock? Why doesn't Drew McIntyre, CM Punk, Jey Uso, and Cody Rhodes draw as much as Kane, Stone Cold, The Rock, and Jericho? Well, you're just dumb. You're just a retard, or you're lying to yourself. Because the answer is self-evident. You look at The Rock, and you look at Cody Rhodes, and you know in your heart that one is going to draw more than the other, and you know exactly who that person's going to be. Now, with all this being said, we find ourselves at an impasse, right? We find ourselves in this dumbass situation where people have acknowledged the cultural shift and they are happy with it, quote unquote. The 900,000 people are happy with where things are, right? They say things like, Vince McMahon doesn't know wrestling. Like, shut the fuck up. You've been watching for 4 years. Vince McMahon fucking invented it. This would be the equivalent of like breaking a light bulb and being like, Thomas Edison doesn't know shit about light bulbs. Oh, it wasn't Edison who invented it. Shut the fuck up. I'm tired of that shit. You know? We've taken greatness and reframed it as not great. And this is the problem, fundamentally. Our culture is such where if you're great, people, this has always been the case. When you're great, people come after you and they tell you you ain't shit. And you have two options. You can buckle down and fail, or you can stand up for yourself. This is not new. I'm going to say something that might be a bit controversial. Michael Jackson, motherfucks, in my personal opinion, is probably the greatest entertainer of all time, right? If you know, you know. I don't know what to tell you, right? Now, Michael Jackson was accused of being a child molester. And if he is, I hope he fucking rots in hell. But in my personal opinion, one of the reasons why this stuck, even though there was no actual evidence, it was just claims, is because Michael Jackson was a passive, pussy type dude. That's how he was in his nature, right? If someone, like, for example, Donald Trump, right? He's been accused of worse shit, right? He's been accused of rape. He's been accused of, like, well, not worse shit, but equally bad shit. But nothing sticks to him because he doesn't give a fuck, right? The art of not giving a fuck is gone. Nowadays, people say something and then they get upset. And if they're not upset, someone else is upset. So everyone apologizes, right? And everyone tries to make everyone happy. This is fundamentally why I am of the opinion that the fans, not just WWE fans, but the fans of anything, don't know what they want. How can they know what they want? Imagine if someone said, well, what do you want to see in baseball? Someone asked 5 years ago. I think almost nobody, maybe a few Asian fans, the 5 Asians that watched baseball before, right? They would say like, oh, I'd like to see an Asian player become the best of all time, right? Nobody had that in their fucking bingo cards. But look at him now, motherfucks. Shohei Ohtani is outdrawing, well, obviously he's outdrawing SmackDown. I mean, like, a fucking retarded person playing the flute could outdraw SmackDown. But he's outdrawing SmackDown by like 15-fold. You know what I mean? Nobody knows what they want. Nobody knows what's exciting until they see it. The problem is, Shohei Ohtani is a real athlete. In wrestling, people still don't know what they want. They think they want what is presented to them. This is a form of tweedism. Look up Boss Tweed, motherfucks. Learn a lot about elections from this motherfuck. But tweedism, like WWE curates 50 wrestlers. They present them to you. And then you think these guys are the best. And then WWE goes a step further. They say, Booker T is the best. He's going to be the champion. And then some asshole is like, I want Shannon Moore to beat Booker T for the World Heavyweight title. I like Shannon, right? And they expect WWE to listen to them. Back in the day, WWE would say, no, motherfuck, King Booker is the champion. We don't got anyone better. It's him, cuts this. But nowadays, the fans have begun to win. Nowadays, the fans, R-Truth gets fired for contributing nothing for 15 years. And everyone is like, they fired R-Truth? We want R-Truth back. Here he is. You have him back. He's just there embarrassing himself. You have him back. Are you happy? Are you truly happy that he came back? To anyone? Remember when he got fired and I said people are wrong about wanting him back? Remember that, motherfucks? Everyone was like, you don't get it. Now it's going to be Ron Killings. Yeah, look at him now. Look at him now. It's even more embarrassing than before he got fired. You know? So there you have it. That's the problem. The problem is that people want Shohei Ohtani, but they don't know that they want Shohei Ohtani. Nobody knew they wanted The Rock. When The Rock was Flex Kavana in like bullshit wrestling, or when he was Rocky Maivia, nobody wanted him, right? Nobody thought this guy could be a massive star, right? Nobody thought that shit. Not one person. They probably thought, I think Owen Hart, rest in peace. I think Owen Hart needs a push. No, jabroni, The Rock needed a push. And this brings me to the last point that I wanted to make about this shit. The fact of the matter is, let me put it to you this way, cuckolds. Back in the day, wrestling was so ingrained in the culture that people looked forward to the collaboration of culture and wrestling, right? In other words, right? You had something like Halloween. And one of the things as a kid that you would think is, I wonder if Halloween fell on a Friday or a Monday, right? Or whatever, a Tuesday, I guess, because wrestling, SmackDown was on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Thursdays usually, but anyways. What people would think is, wow, it's Monday Night Raw. I wonder how Halloween is going to be implicated in tonight's episode of Monday Night Raw. I can't wait to watch. We went from that to, oh, it's Halloween. I'm not going to watch wrestling. Oh, it's Halloween. Do you expect people to watch wrestling on Halloween? Yes. Yes, I expect people to not give a flying fuck about a children's holiday where you dress up as mummies and vampires and give out candy while watching Raw. That's what I expect. Yes, I expect 25-year-olds to like cool things instead of, oh, I'm thinking I'm going to dress up as a fart meter. You know what I mean? Oh, I think I'm going to dress up as a slut. You know what I mean? Yes, I prefer the times when 20-year-olds and teens were like, I'm not going out today to celebrate some bullshit. You know, I'm not going to go out, embarrass myself dressing up like a fucking booger or something like that. I think I'd rather watch Booker T get his ass beat by like Stone Cold. You know? Yes, that was better. That was better. And don't act like all the world is like outside on Halloween. This entire generation is fucking weird. Everyone just stays inside all day. They go on their little computers and they're like, I'll trade you 3 blue gems for 5 green gems. Maybe my character can marry yours in World of Warcraft. Like, this is the fucking generation. And you tell me, and the hater always brings it full circle, and you tell me that when I say this generation is a bunch of losers, right? And people are like, what do you mean? Every generation says that. No, motherfucks. No, motherfucks. When I was a kid, people didn't jack off to like animals. People didn't jack off to cartoons and have like, oh, this is my waifu. Nah, I am cooler than people who think it's normal to have a waifu. I am cooler than some 18-year-old who has a dangly earring. Fuck off. You know what I'm saying? We all know that's true, right? Who do you think's better, honestly? Straight up, pick an old-timey motherfucker. Like, who do you think's cooler? Sean Connery? Or Mr. Beast? You know what I mean? Exactly, motherfuckers. Shut the fuck up. You all know I'm right. And that's the problem. Instead, we have a generation of a bunch of pussies who want to see themselves represented. We all wanted to see ourselves represented. But the problem was, we didn't want us specifically to be represented the way we are. We wanted to see ourselves be represented in the way we wanted to be, right? You're pissed off at your boss. You wish you could hit him with a chair on the head, give him a stone cold stunner, and drink a beer over his lifeless body. You wish you could do that, but you can't because you're not a fucking psychopath. So instead, you take that abuse, if it's within reason, then you go home and you turn on TV, you get a beer, you buy a pizza, and you watch Monday Night Raw, and you have the time of your life as Vince McMahon, who reminds you of your boss, tells you ain't shit, but then he gets chokeslammed through a flaming table by a fucking retard wearing a red mask. And then that retard gets stunned by Stone Cold, who drinks beer all over them. That's what wrestling is. Nowadays, people are like, I'm unremarkable. I'm a fat fuck. I can't fight worth a damn. I'm losing my hair at 25. Oh, you know who I like? Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens. I like them. They remind me of me now. No, motherfuckers, that's not good enough. It's not good enough. And that is the issue. People have lost their way. And the facts, as usual, are the facts. We cannot continue this any longer. The culture is only going to get worse. And wrestling has a hope. Unlike other forms of entertainment, wrestling has a hope because they can engineer what happens. Nothing stops Triple H and Lee Fitting, Paul Levesque and Lee Fitting, from tomorrow just saying, fuck, Triple H coming out with the mic saying, fuck this shit, we're done, motherfuckers. We're done with Netflix. We're going to go on YouTube. We're going to go on Twitter, but we're going to bring back the Attitude Era. That company's failing anyways. Nothing prevents them, except for, obviously, publicly traded company. But the point is, conceptually, nothing blames him. I mean, nothing stops him. So with that being said, take care of yourself, cucks. And I'll see you guys probably later tonight for a raw review up in this bitch. Haters feeling some type of way today, motherfucks.